19th, 6:32 p.m. We'll start with the Admin and Public Works Committee meeting. So first item on the agenda is the roll call.
Chair Garitano,
Present.
Councilmember Bros,
Here.
Councilmember Edens,
Here.
Councilmember Remy,
Present.
Councilmember Farmer,
Here.
Councilmember Bertolino,
Here.
Councilmember Rambo,
Here.
Councilmember Flasher.
All right. Second item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the July 14, 2020 meeting. Is there a motion for approval of the minutes? Made by Councilmember Farmer. Is there a second? Councilmember Remy. Any comments or edits on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Minutes
I'll
are-
abstain, Joe.
We have one abstention, Councilmember Brost.
I was
All right.
not present.
Fair enough. Next item, number 3 on the agenda is public participation. I'm not aware of any comment cards submitted electronically. I do see 2 attendees on the Zoom. So if you wish to speak during this portion now of public participation, if you could either make a notation on the chat or is there a raise hand feature for that, Sam?
Yes, Councilmember Garitano, Mr. Dons is on the line, and he did submit a comment form or a comment using our online form. So he just asked that it be read into the record by a staff member. So either I or Megan can do that. My voice is a little scratchy.
I have it.
Thank you. Yeah, if you could take care of that.
Okay, so I'll read Mr. Dons' comment into the record. He says, I'm a resident of Ward 1. I am a huge fan and proponent of deer hunting, and good deer management. The deer survey piqued my interest regarding engaging the Wildwood Deer Management Committee and offering a voice from the hunting community. While special steps may be considered for short-term deer management and reduction of the herd, in the long-term, hunting, especially archery hunting, is the most affordable and practical method of herd management. Prior to the city spending funds on expensive methods of deer management, I suggest we should make sure we are encouraging residents to hunt and or welcome a hunter to their land in order to help manage the herd by focusing on harvesting female deer does. I love deer and I love seeing the deer in my yard, but like the deer survey identifies, most of us that took the survey agree with MDC regarding the fact that we have an overpopulation issue. I suggest we promote hunting and the use of organic, free-range protein harvested right here in Wildwood.
All right, thank you, City Clerk Megan Eldridge, for reading that. So we have read those comments into the record. Is there anything else that the public participants would like to either add, Mr. Dons, if you want to add to that, or say anything else in addition to your comments that have been read, or the other participant on the line going by the name of Scott?
Scott Collier is our marshal. He should be joining us for the discussion on the deer management plan.
Got
We
it.
also did receive a comment from Linda and Robert Hunter earlier today. They just wanted to have their comment included as part of the record, but not read during the meeting. So we'll include those with the minutes.
All right. Is it pertaining to a topic that's on the agenda?
It was the deer management
Right.
plan, just concerns about the deer in their neighborhood. So,
Would it be possible, as we get into that later on, could you forward that to us now?
sure.
So at least folks could at least take a look at it. It may factor into any decisions. So we'll get that comment over to us. All right. Well, moving along, then we'll close out public participation. We'll move into section 4 of administration. We have one for information item. This is the social media policy. It's an item that has been previously discussed and is back on the agenda. So I'm going to hand it over to City Administrator Anselm to introduce it.
Thank you, council member, and good evening to the rest of you. Just to give some background for the members who weren't on council a couple of years ago, when this item first started popping up, We did share some information about our existing social media policy at the time, and there was some information, some discussion had about what social media policy should contain for the city of Wildwood. So for tonight's discussion, what I did was I included both our existing policy that was adopted by council resolution a few years ago, and also included a model IMLA social media policy that has been developed by municipal lawyers throughout the state and as well as throughout the country. So as I indicated in my memo, I think the policy that was adopted by resolution is a very good one. It's a good public facing policy. It lets our residents know what we will and will not allow on social media. It gives some guidelines for city employees in terms of what we can and cannot share on social media as well. I would not recommend any changes to that policy at this time because I think it's pretty good. But as we look into some of the internal issues, we do not have a good social media policy for employees or for use by city staff members. So included just the long policy, and as you read through that, you'll notice it's sort of written in a very broad format to include counties, big cities, small cities. So there are some sections where it recommends maybe adoption for certain local government entities, but not necessarily all of those. So I figured rather than tailor that for the purpose of tonight's conversation, I would share that with the entire committee and entertain any comments or suggestions on what the policy should or should not include. And if we don't get any of those comments this evening, then I'll go ahead and start to edit the IMLA policy, and then we'll work that through the committee in the future. Really brief overview for a 40-something page document. So happy to answer any questions.
Councilmember Garitano, you're on mute, but your lips were moving.
Oh, thank you. Sorry about that. Yes, so I've got Edens, Bertolino, and Remy. So Councilmember Edens, please go right ahead.
Sam, who is in charge of posting for social media, or is it just depending on the department? Does Parks and Rec do their own? Public Works does their own?
Yeah, so we have a social media team that consists of myself, our economic development manager, Kathy Arnett, our assistant planning director, Travis Newberry, our planner, and Chris Parker. No, actually Bree Kelchin, who is our registration specialist. So she handles a lot of the rec events.
Okay, and if there's an emergency or something needs to be posted about maybe a road being closed, can that just be done, or does everyone on that committee have to be contacted first, or how does that work?
Yeah, so we use Microsoft Teams to really sort of prepare, and we also use Debbie Ward, who is a consultant that helps us sort of plan our social media posts. But we use her a lot to sort of come up with that plan, and then we typically come up with verbiage for each of those. So if they're an emergency situation, I suspect, as we have done in the past, we'll just jump onto Microsoft Teams, say, hey, we need to post something about XYZ. We'll usually craft some language, and then we all sort of take a look at it together and suggest changes and tweaks to the language, and then we post it.
Okay, so then it sounds like that process is working. I mean, do you have any recommended changes?
No, I think it works very well. I mean, I think when you see some of the usage numbers of social media that have gone up, especially over the last several months, the team's doing a fantastic job with it. So.
Okay.
All right. We'll have Councilmember Bertolino and then Remy.
Yeah, Sam, if I heard you right, you said that there isn't a policy for the internal use employees. Is that what I heard you say?
Yeah, so our rules and regulations manual doesn't cover, I mean, it doesn't designate a specific, social media person. So, absent a policy, and it also, a lot of cities, especially cities that are larger than ours, will say, if you are an employee who uses social media, you can't post, can't represent yourself taking official city positions on your social media page. So issues like that tend to happen in larger cities. I haven't seen it happen here. I mean, most of our employees who are on social media do a pretty good job of saying, either am or am not a representative of the city. And if they're working as a representative of the city, or if they're posting as a representative of the city, they make that clear. Or if they're sharing their personal opinions, they do that as well. But it's my overall impression of the IMLA model social media policy is it's designed for larger organizations to designate certain roles and responsibilities, which then do have potentially some public records, sunshine law ramifications to it, so that if there is a post that's on social media that needs to be deleted, we have the policy that was adopted by the resolution that says we have the authority to take that down. But the internal policy would say, here's the process for removing a post from social media in order to comply with sunshine law. So you have to take a screenshot, or you have to use a archiving software system to do that before you can make any deletions. Now, we don't delete comments generally, from our social media pages, because our residents are well behaved on social media, so they tend not to use cuss words, and on the whole, they have good civil conversations. But if we ever needed to remove a post for whatever reason, there isn't really a well-defined process internally for that.
Okay, so you're really just this taking the IML basic document and modifying it somewhat to fit the needs of our city, and really all it is getting that link to the employees that says, you have to follow the same things everybody else does on our social media content. Plus, here's the processes we go through if we have to take action. Is that kind of in summary what you're trying to do here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
And I think that captures my perspective. Now, I know there's some history to this particular conversation that I'm certainly willing to try and address as best I can. But, having only been here for a year when this issue came up prior to my arrival, I'm not as familiar with the history of it. So that's why I figured, again, I would just start from scratch with the policy that we adopted and then propose the IMLA.
That history is pretty ugly. So let's just put it in the past and keep moving.
I'm in favor of that approach.
All right, Councilmember Remy.
Thank you, Sam. I think it's a good policy and how it applies. I do have a question for other council members, and if there's permission, I'd love to open up a dialogue. I think this is a great step for our city employees. I wonder if there's any appetite in this upcoming year for our council to consider our own social media policy and to work through at least a guidelines policy that may be beneficial, that keeps guidelines so that we also maintain the same distance from our personal pages and not blur the lines between public comments in our official capacity versus our own personal private comments, which we're certainly in.
You cut out at that last part, Ken.
Sorry about that. Just didn't know if there might be interest on this committee to take that up going forward for council members, just so we could adopt perhaps our own social media policy guidelines, if you will, just for when we're acting on behalf of putting forth business of the city rather than our own personal private comments.
Got it. Anyone else wishes to speak on this topic? I didn't see any other hands up. Councilmember Edens and then Bertolino.
To answer Councilmember Remy, I think that one of the things we could do would be to come up with some standard language on page, I think it's 27 under subsection 13.5. It encourages use of a disclaimer. So if we had a general wording that we could have council members post on their social media pages when they're using a social media page as a council member or as a mayor, as opposed to just Ken Remy from down the block, right? If we all have the same standard language disclaimer that this is not officially representing a view from the city, but is representing our personal views, I think that would be good. We would want to say that it maybe needs to be, pinned at the top so it's clearly visible. The other question would be, do we also need similar guidelines to the city employees about things like hate speech, and making sure that we're not participating in dialogue with groups that promote that type of activity in a way that does not limit free speech, but merely keeps it from being a reflection of our job. I would support that.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Yeah, I'll wait in for just a second. Ken, good ideas, Ken. Again, the ugly history, and I think if I learned anything from those discussions over the last few years, it's that an elected official is in a unique bubble. We have to rely on the fact that everybody who's elected to the council and the mayor has the best interests of the city at heart. And when we start putting some parameters around what that person can say and do, it's one of those issues for me that says, be careful what you wish for. Because you may have an instance where you say, I really want to corral this council person because they really talk like they're trying to speak for the city, and we know they don't. At the same time, I want to express my views. And at what point is it my right to say, hey, Joe's really way off there in the weeds. He doesn't represent us for what he's saying, versus the opposite of that. So I'm all for a discussion on this, but the question is, be careful what you ask for. Let's keep the elected, in my opinion, keep the elected officials as arm's length as possible from some of these policies.
Yeah, I think what I might want to just add there needs to be a clear definition of what is considered acting in your official capacity versus not acting in your official capacity. So therefore, if the city is going to provide, using taxpayer dollars, an account on social media, or the city is going to manage that account on your behalf or set it up on your behalf, then I could see that being a city type of account, just like how you get a city email. But that clear definition, just for the sake of the fundamental rights that people have, that if they are in their personal capacity, then that is, they are acting as themselves as an individual, and the city cannot infringe on those rights. So the definitions should be made clear there. Councilmember Remy.
No, I appreciate it, and I agree with everybody's comments. I think what could be really helpful is, additionally, we may just want to have at some point in the upcoming year, I think it'd be a nice time to have our city attorney and the city administrator just also present that delineation so that everybody understands what's clear, so that there isn't that impropriety where someone is using their personal page inappropriately as a public official, speaking as a public official, which I haven't seen in a while. But I think it's important for us to at least consider that as we move forward, just to provide that insight.
As a thought, if you don't mind, Chair, jumping in, when we adopted the email policy a couple of months ago, that included sort of the same conversation. We might want to take a look at that email policy and just see if we should include, social media as part of that, because I think that has the mechanism in place already to have staff, review that information. To your point earlier, Mr. Garantano, I mean, we don't have any public official pages that city staff members maintain, and nor is that really a best practice in the field of social media. So we really just stick to city information, and then we certainly invite elected officials to share that on their pages, but we do not run any pages for elected officials, and nor should we.
Yeah, I agree. Best to stay out of it. All right. Any other comments? Any other hands up? Councilmember Farmer.
Yeah, I think along the lines of the email thing, the biggest concern I think with legislating anything is, I think all of us currently have a sense of what those things should be, but if we don't, if we forget to put something in there, then that can become a problem. So, I mean, perhaps a mechanism of some kind that puts something into review or whatever that, you know, I guess it needs to pass the smell test or whatever you want to call it. But, you know, the concern about over legislating anything is you're going to miss something and then that slips through the cracks. And we definitely don't want that to happen.
All right. Given that, maybe City Administrator Anselm, what are you looking for as far as next steps go with this?
Yeah, so unless I would recommend that we sort of work on crafting the IMLA policy more towards the city of Wildwood. So if there aren't any objections, I'll work with the city attorney on that. I didn't want to have him do a whole bunch of work, you know, and bill us for that without having some sense of direction from council. So, you know, even though this item isn't a for action item, we can certainly start to head down that road, and then we can present, you know, the employee policy at some point in the future.
Okay, yeah, it is under for action. So, I mean, it's under for information, but I don't see that you're going to have any objection to that. Councilmember Rennie?
I'll make a motion if it's helpful for the city administrator to move forward to prepare such documentation and then potentially presentation at the next Admin Public Works.
Is that appropriate, City Administrator Anselm?
It should be. I'll need to check with our city attorney's, you know, schedule and make sure he doesn't have anything. But I know with our next meeting coming up pretty quickly here in a couple of weeks, I would maybe suggest October. We should have something ready by then.
Okay. So for information item, I'm just trying to think back. Can we do a motion on that, or is it just?
I think you can entertain a motion on anything that's on the agenda, whether it's for information or for action. But, you know, I wasn't specifically looking for an action from council tonight, so, or from the committee tonight. So, you know, either way, really, I think we'll be fine.
Okay. Does someone want to make motion on that? Councilmember Farmer? Is there a second? No second? The motion on the direction for city administrator.
I mean, I guess I would be seconding Ken's motion, I suppose.
Yeah.
Oh, is
Remy
that-
I
made-
think
Remy
Ken
made
already
the
made-
motion?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Farmer, do you want a second?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right. Then motion on the floor. Any other questions, comments on the motion? Councilmember Brost.
Ken's motion, I think, was for the next meeting. Are we looking at the next meeting or the meeting beyond that? I think Sam seemed like a little bit more daylight in between the meetings to get something. So should we have, I mean, when are we asking Sam to turn this around is my question under the motion.
Chair, I'm happy to modify my motion to say, let's say a time frame of up to 90 days. That gives them a little bit more time to do that in maybe October, if that's okay with the person that seconded it.
Okay, so motion now, City Clerk Aldridge, you got the new motion then, or the motion as it is now?
Yeah, I guess, Councilmember Remy, can you repeat it so I have it verbatim? So it's listed correctly in the minutes.
Sure, I'm making a motion to prepare the documentation to come back to the city, the Admin Public Works meeting within 90 days with the language that would be specific to the city of Wildwood.
Thank you.
All right. We got the motion on the floor. All those in favor, say aye.
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 But I just wanted to clarify something.
All right, well, motion, we've gotten a vote, so the ayes, any opposition or any abstentions? All right, well, that motion did get voted on, so it passed, but Councilmember Edens, you want to still go ahead?
Yes, City Administrator, I just wanted to clarify, could you just include sample language of what a disclaimer would look like? I think it might be the in-between solution to make sure that we're not limiting anyone's free speech.
Yeah, I believe that was part, like, as you mentioned, that's mentioned in the policy. So we'll wordsmith that a little bit. Thank you.
All right. Moving on back to the agenda, then next item on the agenda is B for action. The first item there, which is the elected officials paying for public records. And this is an item that has been on the agenda for some time. It was once discussed, and so it is back as well.
Thank you, Mr. Garitano. And our city attorney is unfortunately unable to be with us this evening, but he and I did work together on this particular topic and in creating and crafting this memo. So as you read, there are some concerns that we have with regard to not allowing or not charging elected officials or appointed officials for public records. It seems to conflict with our conflicts of interest portion of our code of ethics. So because of that, it would be our recommendation that we go ahead and treat elected officials the same way we would treat anybody else who makes a request. Generally, we don't always charge everybody for those requests. If it's pretty quick, submittal that we can gather and turn around pretty quickly, and it's an electronic record, we typically don't charge for that. Now, anything over about a half hour or 30 minutes time, we might take a look at, maybe including a small nominal fee for, but I'm glad City Clerk Eldridge is with us this evening. She can certainly answer any questions that you might have regarding the process of filling public information requests. But it is our opinion, both mine and the city attorneys, that we continue to, treat council members the same way we would treat residents. Absent that, council does have the option, if they so choose during a public meeting, to vote to allow elected officials to not be charged for those records. So yeah, I guess you do have two options, but we would recommend treating everybody the same.
Okay. Anyone wish to speak on the matter? Well, I see Councilmember Bros, but I'll go ahead and say something too related to that. I do think for purposes of fairness and also to ensure that we're responsibly utilizing our city resources for business that benefits our residents, that something like this should be considered. Councilmember Bros.
Yeah, Joe, I was basically just going to sort of say what you said, but you said it better. But I reading this, the recommendation that's put forth, I think makes sense. And there's no reason why any one of us should not pay consistent with any other resident.
Councilmember Arlino.
Yeah, Sam, a couple of things for clarification. If any one of us on this committee needed to secure information, maybe it was emails, maybe it was anything that was in our archives, and it took some time to look them up, and we're doing it in the capacity of investigating or reviewing a policy that's before us, et cetera, et cetera. I assume that you wouldn't charge any one of us for that. But if I came in off the street and said, I got a bone to pick with the farmer over there, and I want to see every email that he's written to the city in the last 60 days. And you may say, well, that's going to take some time and that's expensive, so I'm going to charge you for that. Who makes that decision, Sam, about when to charge and when not to charge?
Yeah, so typically, and Megan can jump in here as well, and it just kind of depends. Every request is somewhat unique. So, if Megan gets that request and she says, hey, this is going to take a little bit of time, or it might be dealing with information that might potentially need to be redacted, we'll reach out to John, our city attorney, and have him weigh in on what we should do to fulfill that request. And then by statute, we're required to notify the person submitting the request within 3 days that we acknowledge that we received it, and it's going to take X amount of time to fulfill that request, and there could potentially be a charge. Typically, we will receive that payment before we proceed with any work. So it really just, short answer to your question is it depends on what the request is, but we do typically respond to the requester within 3 days with additional information.
All right, any other questions or comments? Councilmember Edens.
I appreciated Councilmember Bertolino's comments, and I'd like to echo them. It's not unreasonable to ask me to pay like anyone else if I requested all of Councilmember Bertolino's emails on a certain subject, and I should pay for that. My concern is if I need information to do my job that's content specific, and I'm not necessarily asking for emails from a certain person, date, or time, that this could create a prohibitive problem. I've been fortunate that there was information that was given to me about big issues in my ward that has helped me to do my job and to answer residents' questions, you know, and I wasn't charged for that stack of paper to be printed. And I would not have appreciated if I would have been charged for the information necessary to do my job. So that becomes a judgment call then about what is necessary and what isn't. And I'm wondering if it wouldn't just be better to kind of put a pin in this for another day, so to speak, if it would continue to be abused.
Anyone else? All right, does anyone want to make a motion on this? Any takers?
Can I say one more thing?
All right, Councilmember Edens, I'll let you go.
Sorry,
ahead.
I realized I wrote my hand went up at the same
Now,
time.
we'll let you
The
continue
motion,
from before.
but
Yeah.
it was not a motion question. It can promote some sense of equity, right? If you're a regular person on the street that has to go through a process direct, you know, to get documentation and pay for it, versus if you're one of my best friends and I show you special treatment by requesting for you documents that I could get for free. Whereas if you didn't have the benefit of being my friend, you wouldn't have that luxury. So I also see how it could create an even playing field with access to information, but I'm also not going to take special requests for somebody to circumvent a standard process. But I just am concerned that I don't want to end up in a situation where I don't have access of information to do my job.
Councilmember Bertolino.
Yeah, Joe, I would like to make a motion that we postpone a final decision on this policy until our next meeting or maybe the October meeting. And at that meeting, I'd like to see Sam come back with some more definitive guidelines on this decision that when do you charge, when don't you charge? I think that's kind of, for me, that's kind of the crux of this and the potential stumbling blocks down the road. And I would like to have a more clarification on our real guidelines here. And Sam, if you don't mind, I would like to, my motion would be that you come back at, let's say, the October meeting with some more definitive guidelines for how we would decide whether a request is to be paid for or not paid for.
Is there a second on that motion? Councilmember Edens? All right, we've got the motion on the floor. Any discussion on the motion? All right, and then I guess maybe I'll make a comment on that is, Sam, I thought there was always some guideline that said if it was a half hour or less of a staff person's time, that was, I think, free, and as long as it was in the same format. And then anything over that, I think, is when the charge would kick in. Is that still not the case, or is it different?
Yeah, that's sort of the guidelines I've been operating under. Now Megan can jump in and see if we don't already have something more formal or written down that maybe I'm just not aware of. But it's always been our practice since I've been here that you know, it's really based on staff time. You know, we don't mind, you know, producing, you know, documents, you know, for anything. But if it's going to take a substantial amount of staff time, then I think, you know, the Supreme Court and, you know, the Attorney General's office has said, numerous times that, cities do have the authority to charge for that if they choose. So,
Yeah, well, maybe with and a follow-up comment on that, maybe to Councilmember Bertolino's point, it probably does make sense so that we have a written guideline to fall back on so that no one can later challenge it and say that they were treated differently than another person. And that guideline should be regardless of whether it's a council person, a public citizen, that we should have something that is there that is consistent with what the Sunshine Law allows and therefore applied fairly with everyone. Because, we don't want to certainly tie up the city clerk's time. There have been periods during the city's history where city clerk, I think, was doing 90% of that, basically responding to requests like that. So, we've got the data. I know city clerks have done a good job keeping a log of all requests and what the costs are. I don't know if that includes the time, but certainly, yeah, maybe that might make sense what Councilmember Berlino's saying. Any other hands up? Councilmember Farmer, you're on mute.
Yeah, I don't know if this makes it a more sticky situation, but kind of along the lines of the social media and email. Like, I think to Lauren's point, if I need to get information about a specific, for lack of a better term, business related to the council thing, and I put in a request and there's a level of justification in there as to why it is necessary, that might help, separate a difference between, like, is this that I need information about, the deer management studies from 5 years ago because these people have a problem, and I'm just curious about this one thing that I think I need to look at. I mean, I don't want to hinder anybody's ability to get any information, but at a certain point, so I think that some of these things we're dealing with because of things that have happened previously, and obviously for a number of reasons those aren't great, but at the same time, we don't want to over legislate what we're doing and set up a situation where we can't get information that's necessary. So I don't know if Sam or Joe or whatever, if you guys know, like, is there a reason that you couldn't put in there, like, hey, I would like this information. It's going to take a while to pull it, but here's what I need it for. Or is that something we don't want to do?
I would hesitate to ask people to give a justification for requesting records that are available to the public. I mean, the Sunshine Law is pretty clear.
Well, I don't mean everybody. I mostly mean just
Okay.
like, I just mean like council people. Like, if there's something like, as I think it was Dave was saying, like, if I'm requesting somebody's emails, all the correspondence for the last 2 years, that's a different thing than I need some information on this bridge project or whatever.
Well, and maybe Joe, if I can interject, maybe that's the difference is that if you are working on a bridge project, you as a council person would know that that is because of your capacity. And
Right.
certainly, but if you want to, as you stated in an example, look at emails, you certainly have that right as an individual, as a public citizen, to be able to do that. And you should follow the same protocol that any resident is expected to do that. Submit a request for a sunshine request for that.
Right.
And then the same rule would apply to you as it would apply to anyone regarding whether there's a charge and so forth. But
yeah, I mean, I could see that could be a sticky situation. I just think that, there's generally, I don't know that there's that many gray lines between what it would appear to, at least in some capacity, be legitimate official business as compared to, I'm just kind of curious about whatever. I don't even know what it would be.
so we got a motion on the floor to postpone, to come back. And I'll ask the city clerk to just read that for us so we have the proper verbiage with the motion there. Go ahead.
So I have that the motion is to postpone this item until the October meeting of the Admin Public Works Committee, and for Mr. Anselm to come back with definite guidelines for deciding when and when not to charge members' records.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion? All right. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that motion passes. All right, we'll revisit that topic in October. All right, next on the agenda under for action, there is the outdoor information kiosk. This is another item that is back to this committee. So I'm going to let our city administrator speak to it.
Thank you, council member. And just on this particular topic, and having conversations with staff internally and some of the issues that present themselves with having an outdoor sign that, might be movable in some way, shape, or form, and that being in conflict with our regulations on signage. I wanted to bring this topic up to council or to the committee for consideration with the thought that we have a couple of options actually, and we could, perhaps move that type of system indoors and put it in our vestibule area on the lower level of City Hall at the north side of the building. That would allow, I think, some more interactivity in talking with our planning director. He said that as long as it's within the building, we are in compliance with our rules and regulations. Another option, might be if we're, looking to save costs. I mean, we can just move our public posting board from the south entrance on the upper level of City Hall to the north side on the lower level of City Hall. So we could post all of our official agenda notices and things down there. It would be relatively minimal cost, but depending on what the committee's desire is, we can certainly fulfill either one of those objectives. Anybody has any questions about the information contained in my memo? I'd be happy to discuss that.
Hey, anyone want to speak on that? No comments on the outdoor information kiosk? Councilman Bertolino?
Yeah, Sam, I think it's a great idea that, moving it into the foyer and so on. That's a good idea. And you're right. We can put a whole lot more interactive things on there than we would if it was outside. However, the only thing I would say add to that is maybe some sort of a directional sign or something outside that does say that this kiosk exists inside because, you won't see it if you're driving by or whatever, you won't see it. So maybe to make it more effective, more usable, have some signage that says, hey, here it is, thanks.
I think that would be relatively easy to put in place, and it would comply with our sign regulations. So,
Councilmember Farmer.
Hey, I don't know if this would, I think it would be still in line, but I have seen that, there's the ability to have a touch screen kind of through a window. So maybe you could even do that, in the event that City Hall is closed, which, currently, obviously it is a lot. Just having the ability to just go up to the front door there and see it wouldn't be a bad thing either, and be able to interact with it.
Yep, we could certainly investigate that option. I don't know how thick the glass is that we have in the vestibule area on the north end of the building, but if it's feasible, we could certainly look at that.
Yeah, I think
well.
if I remember right, they put basically they mount it on there, and then they put more or less it's like a tape that goes around it, then makes it a touch screen, and the glass is the touch screen kind of a thing.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, like I mentioned in my memo, if the committee is favorable to that approach of maybe having it moved inside the vestibule area. Oh, and one other point I wanted to make, those doors are unlocked right now. They can remain unlocked 24/7. So regardless of when a resident might come and see that and want to interact with the board, they can still access that without actually getting into the main building, because we have two sets of doors there, and the interior set of doors, both on the upper level and the lower level, remain locked, but the exterior doors remain unlocked.
Councilman Remy.
Just in relationship to the kiosk, which I think is a good idea. Councilmember Garitano, do you mind if I just ask a question related to the kiosk, but not directly about the kiosk?
Sure.
So the kiosk provides information and interaction, certainly with our city, our citizens. One other consideration would also be as we're developing that information, could we perhaps evaluate our current City of Wildwood webpage? It's not the most user-friendly webpage out there. And I think that we could probably improve information for our citizens a lot better if we develop the page a bit more.
Yeah, if I could just provide a comment on that. We are looking at the possibility of going out for bid for a new website provider. We're typically November, I think, is when our contract expires. But there are several features, that our website offers that others don't, and that other websites offer that don't offer that this one does. So I mean, there's a bit of a trade-off there, but that is a point of conversation. We are looking at perhaps a new provider. And I think also our agreement with Civic Plus allows for a redesign every few years. I'd have to look a little bit more to see what when we might consider that option, but it's still going to be generally the same type of infrastructure that you'd see. But
Last redesign, I think, was 2018.
yeah, I think you're right. And I want to say it's every 3 or 4 years. We usually have the cost included with a redesign. But.
All right. So we've got several comments regarding the kiosk. Then, Councilmember Edens, you had your hand up as well.
I think that this could be something pretty neat. But one thing I just thought of, if it's a large, moderately expensive board, it would be awfully nice to get some cameras at City Hall, lest it grow feet and walk itself off the wall in the middle of the night. So just something to think about before you invest in electric.
Did we approve the cameras already?
We have re-solicited bids for those. So no, that has not gone back through the Board of Public Safety yet, but I think that might be on their agenda for next month. I know there's going to be a staff meeting within the next couple of weeks to review the bids that we received, and then hopefully get that recommendation to the Board of Public Safety soon.
Okay.
Any other hands up? All right, the only maybe a question for you is, Sam, that vestibule in the back, at least maybe my perception of having going through there, I don't see really many people that go through the back of City Hall besides the employees. Do you think that would be the ideal location for something like that, or is it going to get better use in the downstairs lobby area?
I think when it comes to, most of our contractors, most of our people who come into City Hall looking for a permit, they know at this point to come in through the south entrance, which is the upper level on the back side of the building. But I think just for visibility purposes, I've even discussed internally with some staff members, why don't we just move our official posting area downstairs to the north side anyway? So again, I think we could, install some corkboard on that wall pretty easily and accomplish that. And then we can look at where the interactive sign might be placed in relation to that. But absolutely, I'd be in favor of exploring that idea.
Okay, sounds good. Councilman Remy?
One other additional idea, though, along the lines of having the kiosk for informational purposes, could be to work with our Wildwood Business Association and other community partners, and even develop just a Wildwood QR code carefully positioned all throughout the city, so that if anybody pulls up their smartphone, they could take a picture of it, and it immediately brings them to the city page and can provide the same information, perhaps like an information kiosk might do.
Make note of that suggestion.
All right. Given that this item was under for action and you heard the city administrator and the recommendation, if we want to continue to pursue that, their motion.
Yeah, so the request would be for allowing us to continue to explore the cost of an interactive sign and then bring that to the council as part of the 2021 budget process.
All right, Councilmember Farmer.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
There's second. Councilmember Brost. All right. Any other comments or discussion on the motion? All right. City Clerk Eldridge, do you have the motion there? You want to read it?
Yeah, I have, the motion is to allow city staff to continue looking into an outdoor information kiosk and bringing back um, to the council for the next budget. Is that right? I was trying to write it down as you say. Okay.
Okay, does that sound
That's
good?
Yep, yep.
All right. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Okay.
Any oppose? Any abstain? All right, the motion passes. All right, moving on then to the next part of the agenda. We go to Public Works, and there is one item under for action. This is the deer management plan. So I guess that'll be Rick. You're on mute, Rick.
Sorry about that. Sam, is Marshall Collier perhaps an attendee? Is Scott? Is that our Marshall or not? Do we know?
We're going to pull Scott over, and if it's not Marshall Collier, we will put him back in the attendee window. I believe it is.
All right, so council members, we've invited our Marshal Scott Collier to be with us tonight for this topic. I would like to recognize that Sergeant Brad Wendling is also with us as well to help discuss this item, which is the first initial draft of the deer management plan, which was created. As many of you know, there was a subcommittee of our Board of Public Safety created to address the deer overpopulation problem in the city of Wildwood. One of the first things they did was the deer survey, which was completed last winter time. Those results were tabulated in February and made available at that time. After the deer survey was done, we then moved into putting together this draft document, essentially to put on the paper what our plan would be, and then present that through the Board of Public Safety and ultimately the City Council to hopefully adopt the plan to provide us a draft, a blueprint for moving forward over, say, the next 10 years. This is a general plan that we'd like to see adopted ultimately by the City Council. And I'm going to turn it over to Scott Collier at this point. And I probably should also point out that Mr. Bertolino is our liaison to the Board of Public Safety, so he is also very familiar with the development of this plan as well. So Marshal Collier, if you're on the call, if you want to.
Yes, good evening. So thanks for having us. As Rick introduced, the Deer Subcommittee of the Public Safety Committee has been working on this for quite some time. It actually started before I even joined Public Safety, and much of the work was done prior to that. What we are proposing is a plan that is basically, two goals. One, manage the population. The other, educate, the citizens of Wildwood regarding the plan and, ways to interact more safely with the deer. Each goal has several objectives under, managing the population. A, we need to assess the population. B, once we've assessed it, assess, a population goal. So there is, a number of deer that may be less damaging to the community. Objective C is then to, after setting the goal, then impose and create a few items that allow us to help start to reduce the population of the deer. One of the simplest things is, proposing a no feed ordinance within the city limits. Develop an ordinance to allow properties to combine to meet the 3-acre limit that is currently established for archery hunting, subject, of course, to HOA approval if applicable. And then also any ordinance changes to promote, safe archery hunting, such as, marking of arrows, etc. Another part of the strategy is we want to, expand opportunities or develop ways where we can match people who have property with hunters who are interested in hunting. So we know there are people in our community that like hunting. We also know there are many property owners who hunt on their own property and or wouldn't mind allowing someone to do that. So finding ways to get these folks connected to allow that activity to go forward. Another part of the strategy would be to consider supporting managed hunts within the city of Wildwood. So for instance, within Greensfelder County Park, and I believe Sergeant Wendling already mentioned that the county is already authorizing and setting up such a hunt already within that park. But there are other opportunities on public lands here within the city to include Babbler Park and Rockwoods Reservation. So those are opportunities there. Lastly would be considering a sharpshooting program. We've looked into it. It is a little more expensive than the other options, to be clear. We have, we even discussed the idea of perhaps having the police department engage in that. Other cities have done this, but the county police department is not really interested in engaging in that activity. So it's not one that we think we need or should be pursuing, at least with the police department. The document that we gave you does provide some costs. I'm not saying it's prohibitive, but it is certainly more expensive than the other notions that we propose. The other goal, of course, is educating and communicating to the public. One, communicating to them about this strategy, through flyers and other things. Engaging in a social media campaign to promote the deer management plan, and promoting it, through the city website, through newsletters, et cetera, and trying to educate the residents on, damage prevention. I am not a hunter. I like the deer, but I do understand the need to control the herd. And my wife would certainly support controlling the herd, as her flower garden takes a beating almost routinely. So that in a nutshell is what the plan is about. Brad, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I think you summarized the report pretty well there.
So what we're hoping for is, if you have questions or any feedback for us as we consider at the Board of Public Safety, changes to this or modifications, we're very interested in any thoughts you may have.
All right, who do we have? Any hands up? Councilmember Remy, Councilmember Eden.
Just do you mind providing some data on success for these three approaches over the next say 3 to 5 years, and then what are the side effects as far as have there been with sharpshooter programs any safety problems with humans and any of the other problems that one might expect with those sorts of approaches?
Sure, I don't have that in front of me, but I'm sure we can get it.
I can tell you locally, there haven't been any safety concerns or issues, I should say incidents. Town and Country utilized the sharpshooting program, and the city of Ellisville also has conducted a sharpshooting program, and they've had no incidents of any mishaps or anything like that. So generally, if you utilize a sharpshooter program, it's conducted by professionals that are engaged in that professionally. So they have rather high standards and good safety practices, and they certainly are aware of the potential liability if they did have an accident. So they are pretty in tune to the safety aspect of that type of operation.
And we are aware that the managed hunts present, similar concerns, but obviously, when the state or in particular the DNR, when they allow these hunts, closing the park is part of the safety protocol, making notifications to the public in advance of the hunt, posting signage, et cetera, in and around the park, so as to avoid people accidentally being in the park during that time.
I've got Councilmember Edens and then Berlino.
sent an email out, and Sam provided me with some answers, and I will make sure that Scott and Brad and Rick, that you have a copy of the answers I received. I have certainly had lots of complaints about deer in my ward, but I've also had a resident call me and say, hey, you know, my neighbor, I feel like they're shooting a little bit too close to the road on their 3-acre property, and I'm concerned about cars. A couple of concerns I had is, you know, as I'm looking at, for example, my neighborhood, it doesn't really matter how you slice the pie and how many, you could combine the whole neighborhood into one big lot, and the way that the houses are situated, the way that the fence lines are constructed, there's not really a clear shot anywhere. So one of my concerns is about getting sued for accidents to property, people, or pets if we sign off on combinations of lots in some of these higher density areas. Another one of my concerns is, and I just wanted to know the answer to this question, so I'll see what I can find out, is folks that live in more cloistered areas that combine their lots, could they be dropped from homeowners insurance policies? Because maybe an insurance company could say, you're at risk to property damage, and if an arrow goes through your window, we're not going to pay for it. So that was one of my questions. Right now, I have no problem supporting managed hunts or sharpshooters. I just really need a lot more details about the layers and layers and layers of regulations that we're going to need in combining those 3-acre lots. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. I just wonder, I know that there's a setback, but I still have concerns with, you know, for fence lines. You may not be hunting in that combined acre. You may be just hunting in your backyard and you just averaged it to get there, but you're still restricted by the property boundary, physical structures you've created in your own backyard. So that's where I'm at. And I definitely understand the need for managing a healthy population. That being said, I was the child that cried during Bambi and had to fast forward that part, but we do need a healthy, sustainable population. So I'm not there on the 3-acre combination. And I will say this too, is I wonder if, in addition to HOA approval, if we also need to look at combinations individually submitted, approving those at the city level. So every group of homes that wants to combine, we say yes or no to as a city, not just have you met these requirements and did the HOA approve it, because of maybe the angles that the houses are situated on the lot. And then the other thing is I don't have an understanding, and maybe you can tell me this and what happened in the deer committee in terms of providing notice. Obviously you have a group of homeowners that have agreed, maybe they decide, okay, we're going to have a hunt this day and we'll make sure there's no dogs in the yard, there's no children. But is that really realistic to give notice that at 4 p.m. on Saturday, we're going to have a hunt? Right? There may be no deer in the yard at 4 p.m. on a Sunday. So how successful will that really be versus when you're in the woods and you have a hunting season and you go out and you can stay all day and you find a deer? You're really almost scheduling the deer to be in the backyard. How does that work? Can somebody answer that from the committee discussion with notice?
Well, if you're asking if the ordinance were changed to allow for a combination of places, then I mean the legislation can be drafted in any form. And the committee, we didn't really delve into the extreme specifics as far. These are just general recommendations of general ideas that could be pursued to control the population. So if there's great interest in combining the parcels, changing ordinance and whatnot, we can certainly do more work and be a little more specific into our recommendations. Because there's so many different aspects to that. And we could provide some example ordinances of neighboring municipalities that have ordinances that allow for combined parcel hunting. We could certainly do that. So, I mean, it's really up to So, I mean, it's certainly not up to me to make the decision as to what legislation should be enacted concerning this. We're just trying to provide some guidelines and direction for consideration. So if you want to give us further direction, I think, Mr. Collier, we'd be happy to, do some more detailed work to give you the more specific answers that you're interested in. If you feel like you're interested in moving in a particular direction, then that would give us, enable us to focus more time on a specific thing that you'd like to pursue.
Okay, absolutely. I'll yield some time for everybody else to talk, and then I can come back, and I'm willing to put that in a motion just for more information regarding the 3-acre lot combination and the logistics of that. And also, can we make a motion in here tonight to prepare legislation for a no feed ordinance, or does that need to come from another committee?
I think it might be on is there a state one already on that, or?
So no, that there is not. It's only if you fall within a chronic waste zone. It's designated by the Missouri Department of Conservation. So there have been years in the past where Wildwood has fell within a chronic waste zone, which prohibits feeding. Outside of that, it's not against state law. There's no blanket law. So it would have to be a local ordinance.
Well, and you certainly travel and create new chronic waste zones. So if it's appropriate in this committee to prepare that or to send it to preparation to council, I would like to, that seems to be the least controversial thing we can do. That way we can have some action while we still consider research tonight.
Maybe Councilmember Edens, would that be maybe part of the recommendation as a result of this report, is to include that, put that in the motion?
It could be. I think it would be a really long, complicated, drawn out motion to say prepare legislation for a no feed ordinance, and then also come back with more information on the 3-acre lot minimum, and continue getting a full bid on a managed hunt, or I think it could be a separate motion for.
Yeah, I guess maybe maybe state what I'm trying to say is that it might make sense to see that we have the first a holistic approach figured out, so that we're not making a motion on that and then coming back later and doing other changes. Like, I think it would be good if it comes as a package of here's a set of changes that are being proposed, and include that as one of them.
Okay.
Yeah, so just a thought. All right, I've got Councilmember Bertolino, Rambo, and Remy.
Yeah, if I will, Scott, thank you for that summary. My comments at the public safety meetings when we passed this or proposed this was to bring this proposal to this committee first to be further hashed out and defined before we take it to the full council. And my rationale there was that 8 of us hammering away at this through a couple of meetings and getting all of our questions that we think our cohorts will ask, get those down and get the answers ready. It's going to make the discussion at the full council go a lot more smoothly. I was a little bit afraid to pull this up and send it right to council because I think we could spend days and days on some of these issues. So my request of the committee is that we don't take any immediate action on any parts of this tonight, but that we collect those questions like Lauren has done, collect those specific questions that need further refinement, and make sure that we have kind of thought through what we think our fellow council members would ask and get answers to those, or as best we can, before we pass this on to the full council. So that's kind of my request and appeal. I hate to see us piecemeal this. I really don't. It'll quickly get lost as a full program, I think, if we start cutting it up and sending it to the council separately. And the last little side note is, and Brad mentioned this, that the city of Town and Country had a very successful shooting program sharpshooting program, and they did it for Brad, correct me, but I think they were on that program for many years, and finally got their deer population down to the quote acceptable level, and then they stopped and they quit shooting. And it didn't take but, I don't know, less than 3 or 4 years, and the population came right back to where it was before. So we're looking, I guess I really bring that up is because we're looking at a plan that's going to have legs under it, and it's going to last for a long time. This isn't a one and done proposition. Thanks.
Councilmember Rambo is next.
Yeah, thank you. I propose a no, I support a no feed ordinance. I think that's a slam dunk. I think another slam dunk is going after as many managed hunts out here in the rural areas as we can. I think we need to mentally separate into rural and urban or suburban parts of Wildwood, because the solutions are different and the opportunities are different. I think it's completely infeasible to try to combine properties to reach a 3-acre limit. I've studied this entire issue a whole lot, and from every angle. And archery, it won't accomplish what we want to accomplish. The managed hunts and whatnot, they kill 50 deer in a managed hunt, maybe 100 at the outside. They do several times that with a firearms managed hunt. And I think the safety is really pretty much comparable, either or. And so I will say that sharpshooting programs work. The folks that they mentioned, White Buffalo, these guys are a premier organization. They're costly. It would probably be $1 million. I did some back of the envelope calculation. I won't bore everybody with that, but it would be pricey. And so but what they do is set up bait stations and monitor them for a couple of weeks until the deer get used to them. And then they pick off all the deer in a couple of days or a few days time, and then move to the next area. And they have several deer stations established at any given time. It takes them a while. It's a whole program, but these are like literally ex-Navy SEAL snipers and so forth. And so the safety factor is certainly there. I would trust them in my backyard. Matter of fact, they can come here tomorrow if they want to. But I'm wondering, since the police, county police, probably rightly so, do not want to engage in this. It's a public image hit. Nobody wants their kids to see a police officer jump out of his car and shoot Bambi, as everybody's been saying. And I understand that. And it also doesn't work because onesie twosies is proven ineffective time and time and time and time again. And so I'm wondering, though, if the committee, the deer management subcommittee, looked into establishing a sharpshooting program of our own. It's been done successfully in Minnesota and in Wisconsin and other places where they have deer population problems. They create a citizen program. And the White Buffalo, for example, could send their Navy snipers to train citizen volunteers until they are satisfied that these folks are safe. And we can maybe solve the problem for a fraction of the cost, because even though I doubt we ever get sufficient response for requests to have people come with brush cutters and chainsaws and backpack sprayers to kill honeysuckle, but I know we can get volunteers to shoot deer if we give them permission to do it, particularly outside the season. And so I'd like to suggest that we look into that, because as I said, it's been done before and it'd probably be cheaper. And until I heard that from the marshal that the police didn't want to mess with it, I was going to suggest training a couple of police officers and not doing it on an overtime basis, but we just have a couple extra police officers and that's their job for a year or two or whatever. It seems reasonable, but it's probably unworkable. I'm just curious as to whether you explored those possibilities, and I'll hold comments on the archery until later because that's another can of worms. So I think this needs to go back to committee. I'd like to participate in that. I'd like to have an avenue for participation. Maybe it's just writing up something and sending an email, but I think I have quite a bit to add to this discussion from the perspective of a sufferer, of a hunter, of an archer, and of a deer lover. So that's my spiel.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Rambo. I have Councilmember Remy up next.
How do I follow that? Come on. Are you kidding me? Anyway, to my friend from Ward 6.
Can I say something? I want to show you something. I brought a visual aid from the 40s. My teenage mother, my grandfather, and my uncle with 3 magnificent bucks slung over the hood of what looks like Jed Clampett's truck right here. And this is in the 40s when there were only 10,000 deer in the whole state. Here's another picture from the 40s. Same 3 folks. My dad wasn't around. He was the best of them all. I killed my first deer at the age of 12 in my backyard with this very rifle, and killed my first deer by archery when I was 16. I understand the hunter perspective, and I understand the landowner perspective, and I just wanted to prove my chops once and for all.
All right. Well, once again, I don't know how I follow that. I don't have any pictures from my New York days, but I respect the council member tremendously. I do have a bunch of questions, and so please forgive me for my naivete for my questions, but I figured I'll ask them. So just understanding the problem, if you think about it, for the 68 square miles that we have in and around about, and correct me if I'm wrong, about 5,500 deer in the city of Wildwood. And to get down to the 1,360, that would be the estimate that we had historically for this area, we would have to eliminate about 4,100 deer. So pretty sizable amount. So I have the following questions. So what would be the acceptable level? Maybe it's not going down by 4,100 down to that level, but what would be the acceptable level that we would expect and hope for? 2, Councilmember Rambo touched upon it, but to get to that point, what would be the cost of all of these approaches to get there? And then more of a practical matter, especially as we're amid a pandemic where people, where food scarcity is actually problematic. Is there any side effect of killing deer that could provide a food source for the region for these sorts of for venison? I know it sounds simplistic, but it's possible. And then the last piece of the question is my scientific hat, which is I noticed not on the documentation, but certainly I know it's been attempted successfully. What about sterilization methods?
So I'll try and address these as best as I can remember. I'm going to start backwards and move forward. So we did look into sterilization. There is a price factor there. I believe it was, Brad jump in, but it was between $600 and $800 per doe to do. I did find some information. Bloomington, Indiana had thought about this. Their website had some information about that. The thing there, and I believe before I came on the committee, this was discussed with the DNR, but in order for contraception to work well, the deer have to be in a rather enclosed area, so they can't, that's not the situation here. so the information that I had seems to indicate that it's not highly effective, and particularly when you consider the cost involved. And again, you know, the sizable population of the herd. So that's the contraception, but we have discussed it. Overall, what we were trying to do is come to a set of recommendations that would provide an ongoing management theme, if you will, because I think the point was correctly made earlier. You sort of take this as a one and done proposition. Well, you know, 2-3 years later, you're dealing with the same thing. So to the question about managed hunts and providing meat for food banks, et cetera, that is one of the benefits to hiring a group to do these professional hunts, because that is what they do with the meat. And so part of the cost, if a city were to engage that, is for the processing of the deer meat. And then it's, you know, some of it I think the hunters keep, but a lot of it, much of it then gets donated to area food banks, to your point. So that would be a, you know, side benefit, if you will, from that. None of these are, you know, pick one and nothing else. We're looking to have suggestions, you know, sort of across the board. So if the city council were to decide that it would be okay to allow, you know, a certain size parcel hunting, that's fine. It would allow for that to be going on. That doesn't mean we should not also engage in managed hunts and or a sharpshooter program. You know, none of these are mutually exclusive. Rick?
Yeah, if I can add a couple things. I know everyone's got a lot of questions, but this plan is generally quite vague. And because we didn't want to chase down rabbit holes coming up with all the data if there was no support for certain objectives. I would focus more on the objectives that we have. Do you see it as these are worthy objectives or not to proceed with? For instance, we do have as an objective establishing a deer population goal, but we don't have a goal set. That's the objective, is to set that population that we want to work towards effectively. So we haven't gathered a lot of information because it's in the plan to create that. And I see a lot of these components and the objectives of the plan coming back to Board of Public Safety and or the council with more information for further decision making. But unfortunately, there's not as much detail as I suspect you would like to see right now in this plan.
All right, I've got Councilmember Rambo, Farmer, and I've also got a couple of comments.
Yeah, the sterilization is proven not to work, and I can provide, you know, a lot of scientific backing for that. I would love to see it. I would love it to actually work, and I'd love it to be cost effective, but I think we can sort of ignore that one. Venison is nutritious. It's great meat. Food banks love it. I love that idea. I was drinking out of my Share the Harvest mug this morning, but that is not really. That's a side benefit, because if you figure you can get 30-40 pounds of meat off of, let's say, the aggregate average of deer, you spend you know, $100 for the processing, and somebody has to field dress it, and then you wind up having spent a lot more on that meat than you would if you just went and bought, you know, hamburger at the grocery store. So I support the idea. I support the idea, but I don't think it's a strong rationale. The plan here, as was just suggested, is quite vague. I mean, I'd make a motion to kick it back, you know, as it is for further review. And I'm inexperienced enough not to know how to provide more guidance, but I don't. It's obviously not ready for prime time yet. And they knew that when they submitted it.
Councilmember Farmer?
I mean, I'm wondering if, I mean, this is obviously a complicated issue. I am not a hunter. I'm, you know, nothing against them. It's not my kind of thing, but I do know that, you know, we have a deer problem, and it's more so than just the deers damaging people's flowers and lawns. I mean, it is damaging to the deers themselves, the amount of deer that are out there. There's a number of them that do not look healthy. It's just bad. So, I mean, my thought would be something pretty simple and easy would be just passing this no feed ordinance. That's a quick and easy fix or start to the problem. And then I also think, you know, just based on cost and the oddness of it, I find it difficult to believe that we could adequately sterilize enough deer to make an impactful at all. That's going to cost a fortune and not do us anything. And I think we do. The easy thing is, I doubt very much anybody would have an issue with a no feed ordinance. I can't imagine why somebody would have a problem with that. I know for myself, you know, in our subdivision, we have people that actively feed deer, and that is a very real problem. So giving a little bit of a teeth to that would be great. And then I think the rest of the stuff we look at, you know, how we can do these managed hunts properly in the rural areas, and then obviously in the more populated stops.
Okay. Thank you, Councilmember Farmer. I'm going to go ahead with my comments, and then I see two more hands up, Councilmember Remy and Bertolino. All right. Just based on what you're looking for, some feedback here. I do agree with goals 1 and 2, and I'll get goal 2 out of the way. It's an easy one. I think education is very important to making this plan successful, so won't spend any time there. I think it's very obvious. With regards to goal number 1 regarding proactive management, objective A, that makes sense. You have to assess, you have to be able to measure, because that's how we're going to know if we're successful in the future and if things are getting better or worse. So measure is key. We need to continue to do that throughout this plan. As far as objective B goes regarding the deer population goal, I agree there needs to be a goal tied in very much with the measurement part of it. Objective C. So no feed ordinance certainly makes sense. Would love to see if it's something that's fairly common in other cities. You know, there are some people that do feed the deer. I hear the stories. So I think tying that with education and informing people why we don't want them to feed the deer for their own sake would make sense. So awareness is key there. As far as the combining of properties to reach the 3-acre limit, I think Wildwood is a unique city in that we are almost 2 cities. When you look at west of 109, you have wide open lot sizes ranging from, you know, a couple of acres up to, you know, probably even some massive acreage. East of 109, especially in the town center area, Ward 8 where I serve, our average lot sizes in Ward 8 are generally about quarter acre around. You don't get much higher than maybe a third, and the smallest is around 0.18 or something like that. So the combining, I don't know if that's something that's going to be working around here, because there are just too many homes too close to each other. So if it's something I need to be concerned about, I would love to hear it. That's going to be something in Ward 8. Otherwise, I just don't see how that will work given our density. But as far as the you know, additional ordinances, it certainly seems like it would make sense to promote safe archery hunting. Makes sense there. So you know, I think that you know, that's really where I have my comments around. And also, again, regarding lot sizes, I noticed that in the survey results that the majority of the responses, I believe, were people from lot sizes that were less than 1 acre. So it seems like they're seeing a lot of that, or at least people responding on those parcels that are less than 1 acre. So don't, you know, kind of goes back to my point of how do we manage the combining of lot sizes? So I'm assuming then your managed hunts are where more in kind of open park areas. Are we talking about city land, city parks? Is that what you're talking about, or state land? That's probably the only question I got with comments.
Yeah, for the managed parks, it was in the larger, for the managed hunts. Yes, we were thinking about the parks.
Parks. So, yeah, I guess looking at our inventory of city parks, true city parks. I mean, there's the Wildwood Community Park, but that has a lot of space. I don't know how many acres that is off the top of my head, but there are probably some other parks that are more with
67.
67. That sounds, yep, that's right. Thank you for checking that. And then we have others where we partner with the state and the county, but it would require a lot of communication, a lot of awareness to keep people either away from those areas when this is going on. So that's my
right. And as the report recommended, it was in conjunction with the MDC. So none of this is outside of that purview.
Good. Well, I do want to thank you. This is something that our folks are talking about and asking for a solution, and also appreciate that you've done some good research on this and seen what other cities are doing as well. Town and Country is one that does come to mind, but it's a problem that a lot of cities are facing. So if we can pick up the best practices and the lessons learned from these other cities, that'll certainly help us. All right, Rick, did you have something you want to jump in on?
We're just going to clarify real quickly so that everyone is clear. So there is managed hunting going on right now. MDC sponsors managed hunts in Rockwood's Reservation, and Pebler State Park. And that's been going on for quite some time. And we've actually heard now, and it's one of our recommendations was that be expanded to Greensfelder as well. And our understanding is that this year they are going to start that in Greensfelder. And that was something that St. Louis County recently passed an ordinance over the last year that has resulted in that occurring. So it's been going on quite a bit through MDC in the state parks, and now potentially St. Louis Greensfelder Park as well.
Okay. Got a couple of hands up. Let me make sure I've got everyone captured right. I've got, let's see, Bertolino, Remy, Eatings, and Rambo. Is that correct? Anyone else? All right, Councilmember Bertolino.
Yeah, thanks. And guys, I don't want to be accused of beating a dead deer here, but I do want to reemphasize. I really think that my hope was that the committee we'd have this great discussion. We get all these points out on the table, and we'd write them down, and we'd research it, and we'd get back together our next meeting and say, all right, item 1, how do we handle this, and tick them off and go through it. That was my dream for this committee. Number 2, though, is in those, a couple have said, let's carve out the no feeding and send it on. We talked about this in the public safety a couple times, many times, and we kept coming up against how do you enforce it? Okay, are we going to turn neighbor against neighbor, or HOAs against individuals in their organizations? We came up with this, don't pass a law if you can't enforce it. And we didn't know how to enforce it. So that would be one of the top things on my list about what our discussion should be next is if you're going to say no feed, what does that mean? How do you enforce it? What are the ramifications if someone is found to be doing it? Thanks.
All right, next I've got Councilmember Remy, then followed by Eatings and Rambo.
No, I appreciate the conversation, the dialogue. I actually did my homework before tonight, and I agree with a number of the comments that have been made. There's a little bit of a disagreement, and I think as we move forward, I'd like to still see this on the table as a consideration, at least for cost. So point of fact, and I've got data to support this, sterilization effectiveness actually depends on the method of sterilization. In fact, there's been whether it's surgical versus a vaccine versus if it's a number of different ways that people have done it over the past 10 years. And a lot of different locales actually have done it successfully, including Fire Island, New York, and Hastings on the Hudson, in Cuyahoga County, Ohio, Fripp Island, South Carolina. They've done it successfully, but the difference is that their populations weren't almost 6,000 a year. So the prohibitive aspect is going to be cost. And it's not that the method, if chosen correctly, let's say you use the VDZ vaccine approach, could be done, but it's just super expensive. You might reach 90% effectiveness. But I don't know that it's right for the city of Wildwood, but I think it's worthwhile for us to at least explore all options as we move forward. And I certainly agree with the no feed ordinance. That being said, that's really all I had to say.
Okay. Councilmember Edens.
So I wanted to regroup because Rick earlier, I know you tried to wrangle us in for general direction. The two goals, managing population and educating public, 100% support. Annual budget appropriation for Wildwood Precinct and annual assessments, yes, I support it. Police deer surveys, yes. Establishing a long-term population goal, yes. No feeding, yes. 3 acre, need a lot more information. And what other layers would look like to implement that. Yes to managing hunts. Yes to within reason for cost on sharpshooters. Yes to collecting data on car accidents and monitoring. So I'd love to see a number in the next budget process and what that would look like over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years. I think that would be effective. I forwarded a copy of the questions I asked earlier in the week on email. And I think one of the things that I was just curious about, I now know that it can be very cost prohibitive for the good old deer birth control method. I wasn't thinking of it as a citywide approach. I was wondering if it could be used on small scale and very high density areas such as Ward 8 and Ward 7 as part of a combination approach, and if that would be effective for the deer that are essentially in areas where it's just never going to be safe to have a hunt. So that was one of the things I'd like a little bit more information on. I was going to circle back and go forward with a motion on the no feed deer ordinance, but after some more comments made on what the sort of the teeth would be like in that, maybe we should just kick that back to committee. I truly believe that there are the votes there for it. If this would magically, be on an agenda tomorrow, I think amongst council, and there is a lot of time between now and whenever we would get the rest of the plan done. That's a lot of months lost where feeding will continue. But I just want to make sure that we're going ahead and starting a PR and social media campaign on not feeding the deer if we have not already. If we need an emotion to that effect, I would be willing to do that. I don't have a good answer for how do we enforce it. But I certainly think that it would not be the first time that we've put something on the books that we've had trouble enforcing. Maybe we should still go ahead and do it anyway. We have neighbors that turn against neighbors over noise codes. Happens every day, but that doesn't mean we don't try to have that type of ordinance. So are we currently doing anything on social media right now? That's a question of Mr. Dons, if I'm saying Councilmember Redney. I see Bambi in his background. Do we have a social media campaign right now on no feeding?
No, we're not doing anything at the moment. I think there was a thought that if we could get far enough into this plan, we would be prepared for doing some in the fall when we reach deer hunting season, which obviously is right around the corner.
Uh-huh. Well, I mean, if I would you like that in a formal motion to start that as soon as possible, or has that already been voted on to do in your deer task force? I guess I don't know if it's already been done.
Well, it's essentially part of the plan, but I think I'll defer to Sam whether we need a motion to move forward with that. That would be a fairly simple thing to do, but I'll defer to Sam on that maybe.
Yeah, I would just say, I think last year around this time, we had several social media posts that talked about, the types of hunts that were already available, what our laws were regarding things. And I recall social media including some of that information in terms of, don't feed the deer. So I don't think it would be that difficult for us to go ahead and knock the dust off of those posts and figure out a way to freshen them up a little bit and redo that. I don't know that a motion is necessarily required for that, because I think regardless of what the committee or the eventual council would decide, that's probably just going to be included as part of our social media campaign anyway.
All right, Councilmember Edens, any other comments? Okay, Councilmember Rambo.
Yeah, I supported Councilmember Eden's suggestion to go forward with the no feed ordinance right away. But I will say that we had CWD prohibition against feeding last year, and they rescinded it this year. But I didn't see any difference at all in my neighbors, feeding patterns. I don't think people pay much attention to those CWD guidelines, and I don't know that they'll pay much attention to the ordinances either. But I think it's a slam dunk, and it's something that it's clear cut. We can move forward with it. At least it's a positive, concrete step towards solving the problem. We have the all hillbilly photograph silliness aside. I'll hold up a visual aid about our crash. Our annual vehicle crash analysis, and it does have the data in there. It does have data in there about deer and vehicle collisions. If anything, they're probably underreported because some people, hit a deer and they report it to their insurance company, but there's no reason to call the police. And so I don't think that's taken into adequate account. But there's a clear problem with deer crashes and some other problems with the deer population that we haven't even gotten into yet. I will say that the managed hunts, I'm in favor of trying to think outside the box on a sharpshooter program or programs, particularly out here in the west areas, because there's conflicting data on site fidelity, but managed hunts, a lot of times they will clean out a bunch of deer in the 3,000 acres of Greensfelder or whatever, but does particularly are stuck to the sites where they've grown up and they don't migrate in. It's not like you'd think it'd be like draining a sink. They would come, they'd come in right behind the ones that you've killed, but that's not necessarily the case. And so my point is, it's probably not going to do the residents much good. It's going to do the biology in the parks good, which is all, I'm all in favor of that, but I'm not sure the managed hunts on the parklands are going to move us towards solving the problem that we're trying to solve. And the final thing about sterilization, I would love to explore this further. I looked into it from a preliminary perspective, and the only data that I could find in support of sterilization was by the Humane Society of the US or organizations associated with that, because they don't want people killing Bambi. And I'm a Humane Society member. I don't like it any better than anybody else does, but I don't think we're going to find sterilization programs that will work even on a limited basis. But I would like to make sure that when we kick it back to the committee, that they also look into sterilization with fresh eyes. That's really all I had. One more thing. Archery, an arrow will travel 1,000 feet. And a 3-acre lot is 360 by 360 if it's a square. That means you can stand on one lot, shoot over 2 other 3-acre lots into the 4th 3-acre lot with a broadhead. And it's different from a rifle bullet. Those things will just, they kill by slashing arteries and so forth. And I'm not sure that there's a safe way to do archery hunting in these in the dense urban areas. I'd say we have to be real careful with that. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, I don't believe I see any other hands up. It's it. Yeah, Councilmember Rambo. I guess you can put your hand down on the system. That's probably why I didn't see it keep going up, because it's been up the whole time. There you go. You're good now. So I just want to check now. I think we've had a good opportunity for everyone to have some good discussion and comment here. And I know there was, I think, mention of motions earlier, but don't believe that we made them formal. I know Councilmember Edens, you had talked about one potentially, and maybe Councilmember Rambo, I think, if not. So we need to get a motion on the floor if someone is ready to make one. Councilmember Edens.
Do we need a motion to refer not only back to the Board of Public Safety, but back to the Deer Task Force? So it really has to go back to 2 committees. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that would be the request, but I'll check with Rick. Does that make sense to you since you work with them?
You're still muted, Mr. Brown.
I'm sorry. I think the expectation was we would likely be taking this back to the Board of Public Safety and our subcommittee to do additional work. So if you'd like to do a formal motion, that's fine. I think we've got a lot of good feedback from you folks tonight and additional homework, and we could certainly take it back and do some more work and then report back when the time is right to this committee. But if you'd like to do a formal motion, that's fine, I'm sure.
Okay. Do you want to make a motion, Councilmember Edens?
Sure. Motion to refer back to Board of Public Safety to discuss and provide further information as requested by the Administration and Public Works Committee.
Is there a second on the motion?
With the intent of coming back to Admin and Public Works in the future.
I second.
Okay, we got a second on that. City Clerk Eldridge, you got that?
Yeah, did you want it to come back to the committee by a certain time or just leave it open?
Open. Yeah.
Open at their convenience.
Can I say that this was really good work, and we beat it to death, and we're sending it back, but everybody did a great job with this first draft.
Okay.
Agreed.
Any questions? Any other comments? Now you got a motion on the floor. All right. With that, all those in favor say aye.
Wait. Who
Wait.
seconded?
Aye.
Who seconded that?
Yeah, second
I
by
did.
Councilmember Rambo. Yeah. Motion made by Councilmember Edens, seconded by Rambo.
I can proceed.
Okay. And everyone clear on the motion? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, the motion passes. Great. All right. Well, thank you for that discussion there. That concludes all the public works items. We do have several on the items not ready for action. Our next meeting will be in September, and I don't see the date there, but miscellaneous, any comments on the miscellaneous there? Councilmember Remy?
Yeah, thank you, Councilman Garitano. I had, we talked a little bit before this meeting, and I just didn't know if it would be possible for Mr. Brown or Mr. Anselm maybe to look into this as a potential issue we could put on the next agenda. But one problem that commonly happens in Ward 3, probably Ward 2, is I know this seems like a long-winded, bloviated way to say this, but the cell phone coverage on Strecker Road, invariably lots of people actually are on business calls or on other professional calls, or now kids are on Zooms for school potentially. And there is a paucity of towers, if you will, or at least availability for towers. And it's in a lot of citizens have brought this to my attention, as well as I've also experienced this numerous times over. And individuals have contacted either AT&T or other companies, and frankly get very little, don't get very far. But it could be something worthwhile if there's an opportunity for our city to be able to at least interface with an AT&T or to see if it's possible to add an additional cell phone tower so that people don't have that same problem going on Strecker Road or related areas. And I don't know if other people have had that experience as well.
I would suggest Councilmember Remy, if you don't mind, Councilmember Garitano. I had a conversation with our AT&T government liaison about a different neighborhood earlier today. So if you want to send me some information, then I'd be happy to relay that to Chris as well, and we can sort of see what can be accomplished through AT&T or Spectrum if they serve that area. I would think they do. But yeah, I can certainly reach out to our government liaisons and both of those companies and see what options there might be.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else in the miscellaneous? All right. The next meeting date, although it is not published here, it is on the calendar. I think that is going to be September. Is that September 8th?
Yeah,
Or
if you
is
can
it-
give me just a couple of seconds here, I
Confirm that for us.
can pull that up. So
unless it's the first, but could be.
bear with me for just a moment as I pull up that calendar. Yep, I show September 8th at
Okay.
6:30.
Perfect. So next meeting will be on September 8th. Then with that, I guess that is it for tonight. So if someone would like to entertain a motion to adjourn, we'll call the meeting to an end. Made by Councilmember Farmer, seconded by Council Remy. And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion passes. So the meeting's adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Great discussion tonight. Have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of the day.
See you,
Awesome
everybody.
meeting. Thanks.
Hi, guys.